guys, welcome back to The Bright Side. Macy here, the Bright Side Girl, and today we are doing my September audiobook wrap-up. So if you're not familiar, I separate my reading wrap-ups and my audiobook wrap-ups. I have my reading wrap-up already posted and I'll share the link for that down below. But today we're going to be talking strictly about the audiobooks that I listened to in September. I will be holding up the physical books, most of them, so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. So this month I listened to 8 audiobooks, which was really excellent. I technically finished one on the 1st of October, but I'm going to count it because I want to talk about it in this video so that I don't go too long without remembering how I feel about it. But I had a really good month. A couple of them were shorter, but for the most part they were all decent length audiobooks, so I'm pretty proud of myself. I had such a great month. I listened to so many wonderful things, and we're going to get started talking about my favorites. First up, I made a priority to re-listen to 3 Dark Crowns and 1 Dark Throne on audiobook by Kendare Blake, narrated by Amy Landon. I listened to these last year in October and I wanted to re-listen to them in time for the release of 2 Dark Reigns. They were just every bit as good, if not better, the second time around. 2 Dark Reigns was amazing and it broke me, and the cliffhanger was insane, and I don't know what's gonna happen. This world is a very complicated fantasy world where there is an island and it has this magical mystical quality about it. There are queens that rule on this island. They give birth to triplets. The triplets then each have their own power, whether they are a naturalist, an elementalist, or a poisoner, and when they grow up they have to fight to the death for the throne. That's kind of the general synopsis, but there is a lot more to it. There are a lot more political things. There are a lot more magical things, character developments, romance. There's a lot more into it than just like, it's not just like sisters like fighting to the death the entire time. This has officially become my favorite series of all time, and it's not even done yet. Besides Harry Potter, which will always be number 1. I'm just so into it. Amy Landon is such an amazing narrator. She's one of my favorites, and it's very strange because she doesn't really do different male voices. Like, she doesn't really differentiate them. They're pretty much the same male voice. But for some reason, the way that she does it, I am still able to tell the difference between the male characters. I don't know if it's her inflections or what, and it didn't bother me like at all at any point that they were basically the same male voice. Maybe because the females are like the main part in here. I don't know, but I loved this so much. Again, and 2 Dark Reigns was so good. They're all 5 stars for me, and even Queens of Fenburn, which is the novellas, are 5 stars. I wish they had an audiobook for that because it's so good. These are some of my all-time favorite books and audiobooks. I love the world. Some people have said they found it slow. I personally love the magic system and the background history and all that stuff. So if you're going into this expecting just like fight scenes like the entire time, then don't do that. It has like slower world building in the first book, but I gobbled it up. I couldn't get enough. I was like, but why does this happen? And why did that happen? And who's that person? And it's one of those things where no matter how it ends, I think I'm gonna love it because I'm that invested into it. I'm so in love with the characters, which scares the crap out of me. I'm so in love with the world. Every little bit of information we get is just so much fun. The novella I read about the Oracle Queen, which was set 500 years in the past and has nothing to do with these characters, was just as interesting, and I fell in love with that too, and I couldn't wait to learn more. I just love it. I love it so much. It's just like blowing my mind. I can't get enough. Next up, we're going to talk about Big Magic. This one is the only nonfiction book that I have read this year, which I used to read a lot more nonfiction, and that's something I want to do more in 2019. So this one's kind of like a fun self-help spirituality type thing. This one is by Elizabeth Gilbert, and it was narrated by Elizabeth Gilbert, who is awesome at narrating her own books. It's so great. She is the author of Eat, Pray, Love, which is one of my favorite audiobooks as well. I loved it so much. This one is all about like creativity and expressing yourself and like writing and like how to be creative in your life and in your endeavors and how not to block like the big magic like of the world and the universe and cool things that happen to you, how not to block them off with your attitude and negativity and all that stuff. It's like a short 4-hour audiobook. It's so good and captures your attention so well, even if you are like really only into fiction books. Like this one, the way that she tells stories is so good, and she's such a great narrator. I loved it so much. I really want to check out like her other stuff because I think she's like the coolest ever. Then I continued on with my listening of Peter and the Starcatchers, and this one is Peter and the Shadow Thieves. This is book 2. This is narrated by Jim Dale, who narrates the Harry Potter books. He has won like Emmys for narration. He is so good. He's my favorite male audiobook narrator. My husband and I are going through and listening to these together. I reread book 1 last month, and then I carried on with book 2, which I have never listened to before. So these are Peter Pan retellings. It starts with book 1, obviously, and then just carries on. And the way that Dave Barry and Ridley Pearson tie in all the Peter Pan goodness is just so amazing. It's kind of like a prequel to Peter Pan. So Peter and the Starcatchers is kind of like about how he became Peter Pan. So it's set like way in the past before Wendy and all of that stuff. And it is so much fun. There are star catchers in here, and they have to catch this stuff called star stuff because it gives them magic, and it's like pixie dust kind of, and it's magical, and the bad guys want to get it, and there's like several different bad guys. It has major Harry Potter vibes. It's not like Harry Potter at all, so don't yell at me, but it just, the way that like the characters interact and the friendships and the magic and the way that it's written is just kind of got that whimsical, fun, super adventure, young kid feel. Oh, it's so good. I think these are young adult. I'm not sure if they're middle grade or not. Either way, it doesn't matter. Jim Dale's freaking amazing at narrating things. He's so good. You can get burnt out if you listen to too many of his audiobooks in a row. Not if they're in the same series, but I tried, like with Rebecca Soler, I can listen to like all of her audiobooks and it doesn't really bother me as much. But with Jim, I wouldn't like immediately go into another Jim Dale book because he is so good at it that he solidifies his voices as these characters, and so if you go immediately into another book, it throws you off, but if you wait a little bit, it's fine. I love these. They're so great. I'm so happy that I love them as much as I love the first one. There's 3 more in the series. I can't wait to get into it. This one I can't say much about because I don't want to give away spoilers, but this one was 5 stars for me and my husband as well. Then I listened to Cirque du Freak, A Living Nightmare. This is the second book, so I don't have the first one. Narrated by Ralph Lister. These are very short, middle grade books. They're only they're less than 200 pages and like 4 hours on audiobook. So good! So good and so creepy and perfect for Halloween. Ralph was an excellent narrator. These do have a fairly strong middle grade vibe, but it doesn't bother me at all. It's like a young kid that discovers this circus of freaks, and they're actual freaks. They're not just like humans that look funny, but they're actual like magical qualities about them. And I don't want to give a lot away, but there's like vampires and creepy spiders and like just tragic things that happen in here. Our lead character is kind of a selfish brat, which is kind of okay, but something happens in here that I was like, really, dude? Really? You're gonna let that happen? But it was really creepy for a middle grade book. The covers are really terrible, but I really enjoyed it. I'm really excited to listen to at least book 2. I was kind of trying to follow along with hardback orders, doing a readathon of this. I'll probably only listen to like 2 or 3 more this year, but really enjoying it. They're absolutely perfect for Halloween. It's very creepy. The narrator is amazing and I loved it. Oh, and I gave this one like 4 stars, I think. Okay, now let's talk about The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. Decided to listen to this one on audiobook because it's narrated by Rebecca Soler, who's one of my favorite audiobook narrators. I think I finally listened to enough of her stuff now that I'm getting a little bit burnt out because I've listened to like, I don't know, like over 12 of her audiobooks this year, and she just doesn't have that many voices. But this one was very polarizing for me, and I've heard it was for a lot of other people as well, because this one is told about a girl, and her grandmother is very famous for writing these fairy tales that are called like the Hinterlands or the Hazelwood or whatever, and she becomes very famous for it, and then the books kind of like start disappearing, and there's like a cult following because only a few people know the stories and they're really into it, and then the girl winds up having some mysterious things happen, and she kind of has to uncover a mystery about her grandmother and see if these stories are like behind it. So fairy tale-esque, whatever. So this one I expected to be like super duper fairy tale oriented through the entire book, and it is not. The first half of this book is completely different from the second half of this book. I mean like completely different, because the first half is just like her, it's like a detective situation where she's like with this guy and they're like trying to uncover all these mysteries. And then the second half is like all fairy tale land and fairy tale stories and fairy tale things happening. And the second half was amazing. I almost DNF'd this and I was so sad because it was one of my most anticipated books of the year. I love fairy tale stories, dark or not dark. I just love them. There's like creepy woods in here and like all kinds of stuff like that. And I love Rebecca Soler and I was really excited and I couldn't tell if I don't know. I couldn't tell what was happening. And the lead character is kind of an unlikable character, which doesn't always bother me, but in this particular situation, it really did. I just didn't enjoy her. It was just like it was almost reading like a contemporary mystery, which I just wasn't into. And just, she was like super negative, and then her mom was like a jerk, and I don't know, I just was like, I don't really care. This is stupid. I don't like it, and I almost DNF'd it. And I watched a couple of reviews that explained about the two halves situations, which is why I mentioned it. And they were like, keep going because you might like the second half. And so I'm really glad I did because the second half was freaking amazing. I couldn't get enough of it. I listened to it so fast. It was like listening to a brand new book. I was so into it. It explained a lot of the things that I didn't like, which unfortunately, like, this book is 330 pages, so it takes like 170 pages for it to get some answers. The fairy tales in here are super creepy and very original and totally awesome. There's a twist in here I didn't expect. I didn't even think there was going to be a twist. And I just loved it so much. I just wanted more of like the fairy tale stories and more from the book and more information about that and the magic and all that stuff. And I just didn't really get it until the second half. You get a little bit beforehand, but not very much. So I gave this one 4 stars overall because the second half was that good and I really enjoyed it, especially the very end. But the first part was like kind of rough for me because I don't usually like to DNF books unless something's really bugging me, and I was just like, I don't care. But I'm really glad I like it because it's really pretty and it's one of the only books that I got new this year. So yeah, 4 stars for me on the Hazelwood. Hang in there if you're reading it because it gets real good. And the last audiobook I want to talk about today is A Witch Town by Corey Putnam Oakes. This is narrated by Lauren Ezzo. I just finished this today, which is October 2nd, but I'm putting it in here anyway. So this one is about, so it's set like in our world, but witches are just like a thing, and there are witches and they have to be like registered with the government so that we can like keep an eye on them. And it's gotten to the point where there are like hate crimes towards the witches because people are scared of them. So I don't know if the government issued them or if the people did, but there are designated witch towns where people go to live, and it's kind of like safe, they call them safe havens, where the witches can go, and it's basically them and all their own kind, so they feel safer and then we feel safer. And so it is about our lead character, whose name is Macy, which is my name, and it was really fun, and her mom, and they travel to different safe havens and witch towns to rob them. So her mom is a witch and they go and they trick these towns and they rob them, and then they move on to the next one, and that's like how they live their lifestyle. So that's all I want to give you for now because that's all I knew and that's all I needed. I was really wanting to read this because the main character's name is Macy, and I have never read or even heard of a book with the lead character being named Macy. And listening to it on audiobook was even more fun because if I had read it, she spelled her name differently than mine, so I could still kind of like separate it in my head. But listening to it was hilarious because they're like constantly like, God, thanks a lot, Macy, or, oh, that was real good, Macy. And I was just like, it was just hilarious. I loved it so much. I felt like I was a witch and I was like reading it and traveling around with my mom. It was so much fun. I loved it so much. It was so good. It was perfect for the fall. It had such magical, beautiful qualities. I listened to this like in 2 days because it was that good. It's got a slower vibe to it. Lauren Ezzo does a really good job narrating, and she's very different from the other narrators I've listened to, but it doesn't have like a super fast-paced vibe to it, but it didn't matter to me. I was sucked in. I was very interested. I thought the way the witch towns work were super cool. The mystery aspect was really nice. It was like the exact kind of mystery that I liked. Nothing where you have to like super break it down, but just enough eeriness in there that you're like, ooh, what's gonna happen? The romance was really cute in here. I loved the mother-daughter relationship. I loved the twists. that happen. There was several twists in here. Macy is really into using herbs for her magical skills, and like herbs to heal people and herbs to do things, and have, you know, I don't know, uses them for different magical things, which I love herbs too, so that was really cool. I think this one is not talked about enough. It was so much fun. I loved it. It's one of my new favorite fall reads, and I'm so glad that I decided to listen to it after all. And this one was a 4.5 stars for me. Hey you guys, and that is everything I listened to on audio in September. If you guys want to watch my reading wrap up, I'll post it down below in the description. Let me know if you guys listen to any good audiobooks this month, and stay tuned for October because it's all super spooky and creepy reads, more witches, more vampires, more ghosts and zombies and all kinds of good stuff, and I'm really excited about it. So I hope you guys are having a great fall, and I'll see you guys next time on the bright side. Bye!